Welcome back to the Classical Music Podcast. I am Brigitte Valzet, and today I am here with Jacopo Giovannini, wonderful pianist and dear friend, and I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Britta. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm incredibly excited to get into this difficult topic with you today, as I guess we both have quite similar experiences, I would say. Or, I guess this is a little bit one way that we have bonded over the years.
Right.
How many years have I known you now? Like 3? Since I moved here, no?
Basically, since you moved here.
Yeah.
3 years.
3 years. Crazy.
It's a lot of time.
It's
I guess we both changed.
A lot,
Yeah.
actually. This is the most amazing thing. I mean, we were both completely different people 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've noticed, I've made a point of noticing how you've developed in these years, and also how I've developed, of course, but it's really nice to see in a friend, to see how they're growing and changing. And
yeah, it is true.
I
mean, also it's an age in which you inevitably grow and change, and we have both done a major part of our studies. You're done with master, and now done basically COVID allowing done with bachelor.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah,
So I guess let's dive straight into the topic.
let's go.
Let's go. So today we want to talk about musicians' health. And I think this is a topic that is somewhat underrated somehow. Like, it's a topic that I've heard of multiple times. A topic that I even took a class in my bachelor, actually. No, not bachelor.
There.
In New Zealand. But still, I feel like even back then I did not really understand what it meant, even though I heard, all the different sides of, let's say, Alexander technique and many other things that musicians talk about often, but I never really understood.
Why it's so important, you mean?
Yeah, on a personal level, I suppose. You it's one of those things where it's like when your mom tells you, put on a scarf, you're gonna get sick, and you're like, oh yeah, okay,
Yeah, it
I'm
felt
not
the
gonna
same
get
to
cold,
me. Yeah.
But then when you get older, you're like, I cannot go out without a scarf, I'm gonna
Yeah.
die. I guess it's a similar kind of feeling.
It's similar, because as long as I didn't have problems, then I felt like, oh, this is not nonsense, but I couldn't relate. I thought, well, this is so distant.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so distant from me. I'm invincible. I'm never gonna be touched from this. And then you have a problem, and then you think, oh, maybe I should have taken care before.
Yeah, and then you want to kick yourself a little bit.
Right. Yeah. What I had some sort of ulnar problem. So I had either a pinched nerve. It's very hard to know what it is. But I had a problem with the ulnar, so I couldn't feel my 5th finger. I couldn't feel my 4th finger properly. I couldn't move them exactly how I wanted, and especially I lost somehow sensitivity on the tip of the finger, which sounds silly.
It must be terrifying, though, no?
It's really scary. You don't know what it is. You approach the instrument, which is a thing that you're used to do from age 3, 4, and it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
Oh, it gives me shivers.
Chills,
But this was actually around the same time that we were playing chamber music.
Yeah, we were playing trio, and then I don't know what happened. I guess overuse. I've practiced too much, or I've practiced too tense, or anything.
I think it's always a combination of many things. Any kind of injury, any kind of, whether it's physical or mental, I think it's always a combination of the situation you are in at that point in your life.
I was in a very stressful situation. I feel like saying I was in a very stressful situation for personal reason mostly.
I mean, I think, I've heard so many times people are so afraid to use the word stressful and stressed because they feel like it makes them feel weak in some way, yes, and not being able to manage their life, I suppose. But for me, this is something that everybody has to deal with all the time. And why does it have to have such a stigma around it? It's something that you cannot avoid. I mean, of course you can improve it and you can manage it, yes. But it's something that's always going to be there, especially in the world that we live today, which is incredibly fast-paced. and the kind of pressure that you're getting from so many different angles is quite crazy. And I think it's at least for me, when I see somebody that is going through this and then develops an injury, it's not that I can predict it, but I understand why that has happened.
There is somehow, I also felt like there is a stigma around saying, oh, I feel stressed, I don't know, I feel burned out and so on. And this is usually like fertile ground for any type of injury.
Yeah.
Because then you're not gonna approach the instrument with ease. I felt for me was that at some point I was afraid of the instrument, which is also a big step. Like you wouldn't want to speak about it as a musician.
Yeah.
But it can happen. It's something that should come so natural and to a certain extent is very natural. Becomes stranger. I was going through a change of technique. I started being, well, I came from a background in which I was maybe not very critical to myself, and then I came here and I realized what was there to change and what could I improve. And I guess this developed some type of insecurity also in the approach.
Yeah.
And then that's very dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous, yeah, because also I think even when you know you're under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, your brain kind of tricks itself into thinking, I'm going to be fine or whatever.
Right.
You're like, no, you ignore the
Yeah.
problem, obviously. I mean, this is not just musicians, this is a human condition, I suppose. And
From what I know.
yeah, but I guess for me that was kind of the most eye-opening, is when I realized that you just need to be so aware of yourself and what you're going through, and understanding where is the stress coming from exactly, what is it affecting, and how can I manage it then, because it's gonna be there.
There is there is no chance there's a performing artist of any kind you're not gonna be stressed.
No,
I feel like
that's impossible. And I mean the pressure, the stress comes from so many different factors. It can come from parents, especially at a younger age. It can come from your teacher. It can come from social pressure, competition. You know, there are endless things where it can come from.
Yeah, and I feel like as a musician, you judge a lot. You judge even just a person by their ability to play. This is really tricky.
Yeah.
Because if you feel like your whole being depends on how you do the task that you're doing, then it's really threatening.
Yeah, but it's so funny because we do it to ourselves and we know it, but we still are caught in this cycle. And I guess that's why I especially wanted to talk about it today, because this is something very relatable. I'm sure everybody's experienced this. And it's something that we need to learn to do better in order to be healthier, to be more productive, to be more sane.
Yeah.
You know, these are just basic things.
Be less scared. At least for me, it was also a journey to be less scared of many things.
Yeah, and learning to trust yourself and to understand what you can do and what you are capable of and what you're not. So understanding your own boundaries. This is something that you have to train. It's never going to be, okay, I decide now I'm not going to let myself worry about this. You know, you cannot change these things instantly. But that's a great thing also to understand that. And I think especially as musicians, because it's in a similar way as to practicing something, you know, you realize you're lacking in some sort of technique, or you want to do something. This is the goal of your practice. And if you don't reach that goal within the time frame that you give yourself, maybe it's 1 day, 1 hour. It doesn't matter the time frame, but to understand what is the most reasonable amount of time that is actually going to take to learn this new skill or to develop it. Because practicing is you're never going to fix something in an instance. You might for a brief period of time, but not in the long term.
No.
And this is, I think, the biggest difference. You can work on something for an hour and then you're like, yes, I've got this. I got the note and tune, I got the shift or whatever it is. But
if you don't consolidate the thing, it's not going to work. Yeah, that's right.
It's really about incremental steps and little bits every day of the same thing, repetition, habits.
I mean, for me was like the healing of this problem was a journey to learn patience as well, which is not a gift I was blessed with. But it's very important. Also, as a musician, it's very important. We are goal oriented. We're focused on what we want. Very often, we have in our brain what we want to achieve. Let it be on a career goal. Let it be even just on a piece what you want to hear.
Yeah.
And then we fight and we struggle, and we try. Instead, I felt like a lot of times instead of walking towards my goal, I was trying to push my goal towards me, and then this didn't become a path anymore, but a breathless race. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's,
totally. But I guess it also comes with age.
yeah, I mean, from the height of my 23 years old, I can say now I'm very wise. No, but I feel, yeah, that is true. That is true. It's harder to do when you're 18. I had this injury when I was, what was that? 20, maybe? 21. It's 2 years and a half ago. 21. 20. You're speaking like you're like you're 45.
I feel like it sometimes.
But yeah, at the time it was, I went through everything that you can feel. I went through the denial phase in which I thought, okay, it's gonna go away, and the phase in which I thought, oh, this is gonna stay forever, and I'm just injured and I will never be able to play again. You really go through many different stages.
Yeah.
And a lot of time what you just need is patience and to not keep on torturing yourself, and it's a dog biting its own tail.
Literally,
You have a problem and you focus on the problem, and you don't stop practicing. At least that's what happened to me. I didn't stop practicing, but while I was practicing I was not thinking about anything else than the problem itself. And then from being a problem it became the problem with the capital T. And then it was the only thing I could focus on, and that's terrible. That's the worst way to approach it.
Yeah, but it's a process that you have to go through yourself. This is something.
Oh, they can't. It's hard to teach.
Yeah, but what I mean is that like the mind is constantly playing tricks on us. It's always telling us you should feel like this, or you should do this. You should, there's this inner dialogue that's always telling you you're not good enough. You should do it better this way, or so on. And which is a great thing. It's great to have an inner dialogue and to listen, but often we listen too much to the one that's telling us I suppose in a negative way. Let's put it this way. I'm sure you've read the book also, The Inner Game of Tennis.
Yeah, that's a suggestion you made, and I did read it. Yeah,
you did read it. Yeah, I mean this book is an incredible example. Yes, it's about tennis, but it's so relatable to musicians because he talks about this inner dialogue between self 1 and self 2. And this is such a beautiful way to describe what's going on when you're trying to learn something. And it's so great to understand that there are two parts, not just the one that's telling you you're never gonna make it, you're not doing enough, It's good to have this so that you're pushing yourself. But if you don't balance it out with the things the voice that's telling you, this is where you are at today. This is the present. And you cannot change that fact. Because you cannot just suddenly be something just because you want to. That always is going to require work and effort. Maybe not a lot, but it's not something that can ever just magically appear.
Well, what I can say for me, it was not really the fear of working on something, but it was somehow to be very goal oriented and to not understand the weight and the importance of the path brings with it that even if you really want to work, you are always gonna want to get a result immediately. And that's really dangerous. And all the discourse of I'm not enough or I'm not yet at the point is also, in my opinion, at least in my case, was coming from this type of dialectic of, well, I want to get there, so the only thing that is important is to get there, to be there.
Yeah.
And to be there and to get there are very different. So also, I don't know, recovering from an injury teaches you somehow how important is the path and how enjoyable is every step.
Absolutely.
And the fact that not only the perfect achievement, the perfect result is the pleasurable part, is the part that gives you happiness.
Actually, I have to say, really, I find much more happiness in the process of something than the actual outcome. And I think that's always been the case. Unless it's something that I really rushed. And then if something comes out of it, I'm like, well, I don't know how that happened because I really didn't put in my best. And then I feel quite horrible about myself. But most of the time, the process, for me, I don't care so much about the result because I know that what I did in the process meant so much more to me personally than the outcome. And I think that's a really good lesson to learn, and one that I had to learn actually quite young, I would say. I went through quite a few difficult stages during my career. I went through a stage where I was having panic attacks constantly, and to the point I was also very depressed. I could not get out of bed in the morning. I couldn't move. Everything was very foggy and grey, and I'm sure
the whole drill.
Yeah, everything. And to the point where I would get out of bed and I would almost faint, because that movement was too much for my body to handle. And then I started to experience collapsing in public places. And the first time actually was on an aeroplane.
Oh.
And this was one of the most terrifying experiences. I was on a flight. About halfway through the flight, I think it was around between 4 and 6 in the morning, New Zealand time, after I left. And I woke up feeling a bit nauseous. And I thought, this is a bit weird, but I thought, oh, it's just me waking up a bit too early and just not knowing where I am. This at the time was very normal for me. So I thought, okay, I'll just go to the bathroom, freshen up, wash my face or something, like I'm sure I will feel better. I went to the bathroom, and then I remember, I was about to leave. I unlocked the door, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror for some strange reason. I was like, you look like a ghost. I looked both green and white at the same time. I was like, I did not recognize me.
Your face.
No, and a second later I collapsed. I hit my head in the toilet, so I may have had a mild concussion. And luckily I had opened the door, because the impact of me falling, I somehow kicked the door open.
So somebody saw you and helped you?
Yeah, somebody came, and this was the most terrifying moment. Not the fact that I fainted, but when I woke up, I couldn't hear anything. My ears were blocked.
For the concussions.
I guess so, or shock. I'm not entirely sure. There was no doctor telling me what happened, but I'm just guessing. But yeah, I could not hear anything. My ears were ringing. I was obviously shocked as well. And the woman was asking me, "Are you okay? What happened?" I couldn't speak even. Okay. And now I of course understand, but in that moment I was like,
so it was some
where
sort of,
am I?
So it was some type of declination of panic attack as well.
Yeah, it was a mix of many things that I would not get into right now, but I was just in a very fragile state, and I had been through a lot. This was literally 4 days after I had 4 competitions, my bachelor Abschluss, chamber exam, and
many things together.
So this is what I mean, the stress. I so understand when I see this happening to somebody else, because I've been there. And then I was okay after that. I had an oxygen mask in front of everybody. It was very embarrassing, but then what helped was some orange juice. I guess my blood sugar was quite low. On top of everything.
This is for the public. Or if you've got problems, just orange juice. just
magic. Yeah, but this was the first experience. Okay. And since after that, it was happening constantly for about a year. And this was when I was switching teachers. I was having 2 teachers at one time. I was finishing my bachelor, and
so there was instability in your musical and personal life, and this felt not good, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm just, this was the beginning of it. And then, but trying to get out of that, this was the craziest thing for me.
What did you do? Did you go to therapy or?
Unfortunately not. In hindsight, I think that would have been a much better option. But no, I didn't. My family is very much into natural health, and so I went to actually a good friend of mine and the mother of a good friend of mine also. And she was testing my blood, and she was kind of a therapist as well.
Okay.
And I will never forget, this really was the one thing that stuck with me and helped me get out of this like kind of dark space in my life. And she said to me, go home, make yourself a bath, drink a glass of wine, listen to some music, chill out, and just take care of yourself. And that was the first time I ever heard like, just take care of yourself, enjoy something for you. And I know it sounds crazy, but it was the first time I guess I internalized it as like, I'm allowed to do that. And since then, not that I went to the other extreme, I was like, oh, I'm only going to do nice things. No, but it was just like...
But it woke you up.
Like, I realized like sometimes you just need to take some time for yourself and be alone and just enjoy the moment. And since then, my whole outlook on health and especially mental health has completely changed because of that.
And you feel that this influenced the relationship or approach that you have to the violin or to music in general?
Yes, totally, because, well, this was just like the beginning of the journey. So after this, I mean, then I moved here and so on, life, everything changed. There was not so much in between. But once I moved here, it was a huge adjustment. So again, there was quite a lot of stress. And of course, the panic attacks do come occasionally. It's not something that...
You can't get rid, I guess, fully of...
No. I mean, once you've gone so deep into depression and anxiety, I don't know if you ever fully get out of it. I think it's...
I mean, I would say so.
You think so?
I think so. Even if chronically diagnosed, I think you can get out of
You don't
things.
think that it's still normal to have like episodes once in a while?
Oh, no, that is definitely normal. No. What I think is that if you speak about depression, you speak about a condition that is permanent, and it's an everyday struggle. And I guess that if you have had panic attacks, then the frequency of them can diminish, and this drastically changes your life, because having 2 panic attacks a month is so tiring. You can't move anymore. It drains your energy. A panic attack is not just the moment in which you have it, is the before and after, is the moment in which you feel it coming and you're scared for it, and is the moment after, which can last for days, in which you're just energyless. And well, if this happens twice a month, it really debilitates you to the point in which it's very hard to do things. But if it happens seldom, then it's of course very bad, but it's less scary.
Yeah, totally.
I mean,
no, at least I thought that, well, in my experience, I guess once you have experienced, I guess, is it called chronic, like anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I guess so.
What does chronic mean?
The vocabulary definition just...
I don't know. Anyway, I just assumed...
slipped out of my brain, but I assume that is something that repeats for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Before you can get diagnosed with any of this, you usually are under a period of observation. It lasts 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
That's when it's defined chronic.
Okay.
Right. So before you can have an episode of depression, but before you get diagnosed with chronic depression or with depression itself, then it takes some time.
Yeah.
Because it's not a state; it's a condition. That is the difference. And well, you can. I guess you can be out of the. I am sure you can be out of the condition, but as a state, it will come back.
Yeah.
But,
well, this is all I meant. I mean, because
right.
I still have days where I wake up feeling like in the black clouds, and I have anxiety and panic attacks. It still happens from time to time, but I am learning now to deal with it, to understand that this is just my body going through something, and I don't need to take it so literally and seriously. even if it feels incredibly real, like, because there's often a topic or a reason that makes it kind of blow up, you know.
I mean, I think you should. What I feel is that you should take it serious for what regards the way, like finding ways to get out of it. So you shouldn't undertake it and think, oh,
No.
it is not important. But at the same time, of course, it's very important not to take it too literal, as you said.
Yeah.
So not to get extremely involved in it if it's not required to. But I guess another problem is at least for me, what was important to understand is that you shouldn't feel that weakness, if you want to call it so, is not. It's making you worse, or it's making you less worthy, or less. I don't know.
You know, I 100% agree. I
Yeah.
mean, when I said that, you know, I tried to manage it, I think it's incredibly important to accept that is happening.
Right. I think that's important to accept that that's happening, and to seek help if you need help, and to take out a bit of the stigma. And I feel like it's slowly fading away from mental illness and any kind of problem related to mental health. That somehow, if you have a cold, you're gonna maybe take a medicine, or if you have a bigger problem, if you injure your arm, then you're gonna go to a doctor. But often, if you have a problem and you can't get out of bed and you're very afraid, then you won't do anything about it, because you'd feel as if it's something that it's silly, or it's something that is not a sickness, but it is.
Yeah.
And it is something that should be taken care of.
Absolutely.
Especially as a musician, you have to go on stage, and you have to communicate, you have to say something, but to a certain extent you prove yourself, or at least that's how many people feel. You go on a stage and you are under judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the thing I've changed about myself. I used to go on stage and think, I'm proving myself, but now what I do is that I more try to say, well, this is me stating or saying something or communicating something. And this, of course, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
But in any case, as a performer, you need to have a certain confidence. And the problem with mental illness is that it does undermine exactly that, which is fundamental as a performer. And when you feel that lack, then you suddenly feel even more threatened, because it is part of your art, and it's part of your craft. So what I feel is very important to know is that it's like any other illness. Is something that you can go through and you can heal.
Absolutely.
And you should just be aware and seek for help and try to find ways to get through it.
And also allowing whatever is happening to have its time.
Right.
I think this is very important. At least for me, like, I will have sometimes like a wave of emotion where I feel so incredibly sad that it's like in my bones, you know, this kind of sadness. And for me, instead of just telling myself, oh, just be happy, this has never worked for me, and it never will. But allowing myself to let those emotions out first, even if I don't know why. If I don't know why, it really just comes randomly like a wave over me, and I'm like, I feel horrible, and I feel like my bones are aching, and I cannot, you know, and then I just let it out for however long it takes. I had a panic attack recently, well, a couple months ago. I can't remember now why it was, but I was in the middle of doing yoga.
Oh.
Because I guess I felt it coming on, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do some yoga meditation. And I think I was in downward dog, or in some sort of like, I was doing yin yoga, which was like perfect for this kind of situation.
Well, at least you were not in the middle of a balancing pose, which would have been.
And I was halfway through a pose, and I just started sobbing to the point where my body was shaking, and I couldn't control it. And I was like, I mean, of course, in yoga, you're anyway in a different space of mind where you're letting the release of, like, when you're stretching, you're releasing muscles that are connected to emotions a lot of the time. So I understood that this would impact how heavy the anxiety attack would be, because you're doing extra things that are going to make it blow up even more. But it was just, and at the end of it, it was such a beautiful experience, strangely enough, because I remember, I mean, of course, in the moment it felt horrifying. I was just like doing some move and I just was sobbing and shaking, and I thought, what is happening to me?
But maybe it was not exactly a panic attack, maybe it was an emotional release.
It was a bit of both somehow. I'm not sure exactly, but because of the shaking and not really knowing like how, like exactly where it came from. And yeah, but then after, when I finally calmed down and took some deep breaths, I was just so thankful that I had let it out. Even if it is terrifying, I was so thankful that even in such a crazy way, I was able to release that tension, that energy that was building up inside me for some reason. And even if it takes half an hour or an hour or a day, at least it gets out. It's like a detox somehow.
Yeah.
That's how I choose to see it now. Because before it was like, oh no, I'm sick again, I won't be able to do any work. And now I see it more as like, okay, I'm just detoxing and then I can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not everybody is able to see it this way. Maybe somebody is it's blocked from this and truly debilitated to the point in which they can't move. But if you are in the place and the possibility to see it as a freeing moment, as a cathartic experience, then it's beautiful. Of course.
It can be, yes. But as I said, I mean, this took a long journey for me to
Right.
get to this place. It's not something that I was like, oh, I'm just
It's
going to
decided,
take
yeah.
it
You woke up
in
one
the
morning,
most
well,
positive way ever. No.
I'm gonna be happy about it, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an important process, and I think it's important to really search for the way that works for you best.
Right.
And try out new things, because not only we often think that we know best, but there are always things that will prove us wrong. And not only that, we as humans are constantly changing and developing. And if we're not changing up our routine and the way we're handling what is coming into our lives, of course there's going to be some sort of blow up at some point. Because you have to develop and adapt to the way that your mental state is growing into, and your physical also. I mean, as you grow older, a lot changes, physically, mentally, all over. And I think it's actually a wonderful thing that we continue to develop.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we should use that to our advantage and use the opportunity to try out new things like yoga, meditation. There are so many things that I never thought would be helpful to serve somebody like me. I never doubted that they had their fundamentals and they were important for many people, but I always felt very distant and I thought, oh, this is never going to work for me. And then through problems that I've had, I've discovered how helpful can they be for everything. I started yoga as a definitely less advanced yogi than you are. I used to feel myself very distant from it. I'm not born flexible. Everybody who met me 1 year ago would not argue with that, even now maybe. But I have discovered how helpful that can be. I started because I thought, well, movement is what my body needs without being harmful movement or too strong. I've done weightlifting for some time. That is not exactly what your body needs when it's injured. But at the same time, you don't need to not move at all and to let your muscle decay.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, the problem is also that when you get such an injury, you often need to strengthen some of the muscles and to relax some other muscles. And yoga and other similar practice allow you to do that. Absolutely. By strengthening small muscles that you wouldn't take care of normally, and by relaxing other muscles and stretching and allowing the body to reach its normal form. Often when you have a problem in arms or in any kind of, how do you say gelenk? My German knowledge is my German knowledge is none, but I just know this word. And often it comes from spine problems or vertebrae that are too too compressed and so on. And yoga or any type of body aware relaxation or form. Condition, right? That's a good word.
Yeah.
And that really helps a lot.
Yeah.
So from a very skeptical point of view, I got to a very enthusiastic one, which I think I wouldn't say necessary, but very, very helpful.
I mean, it's worth it to give it a go.
Definitely.
I think that's what I would say to anybody that would ask me about it, and I do get a couple of questions occasionally, but
your Instagram is quite eloquent about it, so...
Yeah, but you know, I want to become an advocate because I think it's a fantastic skill for musicians.
Definitely.
And I don't think it will ever... what's the opposite word of be... it would never be unproductive. You know, it will only help you in your physical and mental capabilities, because we as musicians, we need our fine motor skills. And not only the motor skills, but also the mental release, as we've already talked about. But so often, because I also grew up in a very extreme sport kind of scenario before I threw myself into...
I like this also because I didn't. Yeah. Well, this also is very inclusive. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I was also weightlifting for some time, and
your trampoline.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've been a lot of intensive sports, I would say, but when I changed to yoga, or when I tried it after a year, I realized like the muscles that I've developed, you don't see them, but you feel them.
I guess so. Can't guarantee for that.
In the way that you just feel stronger in general.
Yeah.
You don't look stronger, and it's such a gentle way of just giving strength and lubrication to your joints. And
yeah, I also think as a musician you underestimate the fact that actually the movement is not only... It's not... Of course there is... tendons do a lot of work in what we do. And activation and relaxation of the tendons, of extensor and flexors, it's the most. But of course there is a lot of body involved. Any professor that I've been to always mentions how we use our body, how we use our arms, how we use
the whole body.
Our shoulder. Exactly.
Constantly.
You use the body for a different purpose. You use the body in order to have a physical contact with what you do, which I think is also a musical matter, but also for a purely technical point of view, which is you don't want just to involve fine muscles, but for different sound production and for different effects, you want to use really a lot of your body. And how important are things like, of course you want focus on your core when you play the piano or when you play the violin, but how important is to be balanced is extreme. I mean, what I meant is that often you want.
Yeah.
But I mean, how you can learn from singers how important it is to be balanced and to be stable, and how much does this part of your body influence? It's incredible. But even like, it's also from a psychological point of view. If you do think it's centered, somehow you'll have an effect on your music.
Yeah.
You'll feel more connected to it.
You also feel more confident if your whole body is engaged.
Right.
Not tense.
No.
Engaged. This is the difference.
Oh, I mean, 4 years ago I used to play with my shoulders very up and with my spine curve, which is exactly the opposite of what anybody would tell you to do.
Yeah.
And of course I try to develop a healthier way on the piano, but I can say that things like yoga, like a bit of Alexander technique that I've learned in different ways, and it really helped. And even if not directly affecting what I had here, it did make a huge change.
Because the body is connected.
Yeah.
Everything's connected, you know, so if you have a problem here, maybe it's coming from
Right,
a problem in your back. So why not every day do a little bit of stretching?
Yeah.
So it's more of a preventative rather than, you know, fixing an injury.
Right. And also what I thought is, while in the beginning of the problem, I thought, well, I have to solve exactly this. And then I got to the point at which I realized if I don't solve other problems that I have, let them be personal problems or let them be physical problems or imbalances, then it's going to be very tough to just address this one.
Yeah.
And this was a huge step for me to realize that general health general awareness of the body is extremely important, even as a musician, or especially as a musician. I would say you can't say that what we do is a sport, but it has a massive physical component of very, very fine movements.
So on that note, I guess to conclude this week's session would be just to say that don't be afraid to give something a go. It might seem strange.
Yoga might seem very far from what you want or what you do, but
you never know. I mean, we as humans, we're constantly changing, as I said before, and we all go through the same thing. Maybe in different forms, different ways, but we all deal with stress and we all deal with it in different ways. And what better than to just learn from it? Learn from your mistakes, learn from trying things out and being open-minded and understanding that it's okay to not feel great sometimes. It's okay to have an injury. It's okay to go through these things, and it's always going to be a difficult process. It's never going to be easy or simple. But I think try to see that as a positive thing somehow, or find your way to figure out what you personally need to make yourself and your life more.
It seems cheesy to say take it as an opportunity, but that's what I tried to do in the end, and now I'm totally healed and I'm happy that I passed through it, because it taught me so many things about different aspects of my health, of my perception and relation with things.
Totally. And also a good tip, find a buddy, because actually we went through similar things at the same time, and it's so helpful to have friends or people around you that are supporting you in whatever you're giving a go, and you try it together. It's really fun to do yoga in a group. Actually, can be weird sometimes but it's quite an interesting experience to have. So get a buddy and try some things out, and maybe you'll find something that works for you. And I really hope that you enjoyed this episode of us talking about our personal issues and this topic of musicians' health. I hope it's been insightful and educational, and maybe you can relate in some way. And again, if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next week for our next episode. Cheers.